what you just said makes so much sense, because if they're able to have a human connection, I
Yep.
think that's something that is so important, right? Because that grounds them back to the reality that there is more to my TikTok page or my Instagram page, which a lot of parents, I think, have a responsibility in kind of reinforcing, or in telling their children, right? Like, listen, go to school to make sense of what it means to be a little person, right? Talk to people,
Yeah.
as opposed to tell me what you learned, how much did you learn, why didn't you learn this, why are your grades so low? Which is the the entire narrative is different. It shifts from the child going, you know what, I'm enjoying school because today someone bullied me, or someone said something insulting, or yesterday someone gave me a hug, or whatever it could be. But instead of that, it's like, okay, I need to go back and repeat to my parent what I learned today. And the pressure is so much in the latter statement, right?
Yeah, and it's not to take away from the paramount importance of children go to school to gain an education, like you said. It could be an education with practical skills. I would call those horizontal skills and leadership framework and the leadership terminology. Horizontal skills would be what are the practical skills they need to be an independent, autonomous person in the world one day. So, what are the competencies they need? But we're talking a little bit here about actually horizontal leadership or horizontal skills, which is a raise of consciousness. And when you teach children, one thing you said, and thank you for bringing that up, I was actually talking about building social connections. You brought up bullying twice. And I have found, at least in Ontario, this is an area that schools neglect. It's a blind spot. It's for some reason, I don't know if it's still taboo. It shouldn't be. But how do you deal with bullies? Because no matter how well a child eats, how well, how extraordinary, gifted they are, how hard they work, if they walk into school and they don't feel safe because someone has posted something online making fun of their weight or calls them stupid or whatever that might be, when a child doesn't feel safe, they go into adulthood with a lack of trust and eventually it can develop into trauma and and more. So I would like to see, I would say globally, because I saw this overseas as well, not just in Ontario. There is a lack of support within schools and training for teachers to identify bullying, to stop it, and to provide an environment where all kids, even though that's tricky because teachers don't have eyes in the back of their head, it's not 1984, the novel, but where teachers can provide the proper support for children and parents and teachers are on the same page and aligned. Because I would often say to parents, you and I are partners. We're on the same page. I want what you want for your child. So let's find a way to work together to provide your child with the most complete, inspiring, and effective, however adjectives, experience, not just an education of living where they can't wait to get up in the morning. But it starts with removing not just physical barriers to safety, but also emotional and mental barriers.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but bullying never stops, right? The person who's bullying is coming from a place of either insecurity or perceived sense of dominance. And if it goes uncorrected for the person who's bullying, then the nature of bullying changes, but they continue that behavior through life. And since you now are helping people with leadership consulting, it's the same kind of narcissistic, if you want to call it, or ego-driven
Yes.
behavior where
Yes.
those make for the worst leaders. I mean, not to bring up Donald Trump, but that's a bang on example in my eyes of someone who's just driven by ego, who's a bully, and has always got his way. And I see more and more of world leaders who are coming to power with that particular thing. I don't want to go down politics, but it's that kind of behavior that is being celebrated by bullies and recognized by bullies. And what you do at school doesn't stop at school.
You're right. And you mentioned narcissistic bullying. And I'm not on TikTok a lot, but I really admire and I'm surprised how effective TikTok is if you Google how to deal with a narcissistic bully or how to deal with narcissistic abuse. The advice from experts on there, therapists, people, I don't know where they get the information, but there's a lot of patterns and consistency is very helpful.
Hmm.
And I don't see the level, not even close, of support that TikTok, whether you're in India or Toronto, offers kids or adults on how to deal with bullies. And I'm finding that narcissism, a classic narcissist, is now actually that terminology is replacing what we grew up hearing as bully. It's the same idea in some respect, and not all bullies are narcissists, and not all narcissists are bullies. But in the context of school, to teach children about how to identify narcissistic behavior without pretending being pseudo psychologists, but seeing certain behaviors and realizing it's not about them. Like it's about the abuser. And it's a little cliche, but it's true. Hurt people. Why? I don't know. We're not here to talk therapy either,
Yeah.
but it's to give kids the tools of when a narcissist abuses you or has a smear campaign where it's another word for talking behind your back, or uses you as supply. Supply means they're looking for someone to validate their existence, and they turn outward and they go after empathetic people. They go after kind and sensitive people more than people like them, and they attack them, and they're baiting them into a response. And I'm sure the listeners, just like you and I, have experienced those people in the past or the present. And if I knew these things when I was my children's age, and I haven't talked about this specifically yet because they're a little bit young, but I will when they're teenagers. When you see people doing this, you can identify and go, oh, there it is. I now know how to respond. It might be difficult to not take the bait because narcissists or bullies want you to scream and get mad. And they go, oh, they judge you on your reaction because that's manipulation. I'm going to judge you on your reaction and totally ignore and want you to forget or scapegoat you or gaslight you, which is wanting you to not acknowledge that anything happened. I'm going to judge you on your reaction. I'm going to tell everybody that you're going crazy because look at your reaction, instead of taking any ownership over what instigated or what initiated or triggered that reaction in the first place. So if children know this when they're at 12, 13, 14, when now with social media, it's worse than ever. We never had a generation totally exposed to bullying or narcissism, not just in person, but online. And it's our jobs as parents and educators to help children identify it and deal with it. And that to me is in some ways even more important, even though this is a bit controversial, than what they learn in school. Because if they go in, like I said, and they have food, they've slept, they have good parents, and they go into an environment, they are not going to hear a thing the teacher says if the person beside them they knew just wrote a horrible thing about them last night and they don't know how to respond. So we can't teach them until we really help them deal with the world around them.
And earlier, the consequences were like you might get a bloody nose on the playground, or might get your lunchbox stolen, or you might get something which might in today's context seem petty, but now the stakes are higher. It's either ending up in someone hanging themselves or committing suicide, or someone taking a gun and mowing down kids in a school. So it's extremely important to address this. But do you feel on the counter to this, there is because you from teaching high school children to now adults, and common themes being insecurity and ego driven behavior, narcissistic behavior are across age groups. In different forms they manifest, but they are there. And of course, as the years go on and it goes unrecognized or uncorrected, it gets worse. But how how do you instill a sense of resilience from a young age? Now, some people would say, just to play a counter to what you just said, hey, you know what? I got bullied. My dad got bullied. Come on, put your chin up and take it on the chin or whatever, right? But how much of that is important versus, oh, I'm going to protect my child? So there is a balance clearly. But from your experience, how much of resilience meshes in with protection to make these children who will be future young adults and future adults who are in the society shaping the way interactions are determined?
Well, there's a fine line there, Sundeep. So if a child, for example, I'll use my kids as examples because these are relevant and real and authentic. My daughter went out, she tried out for an art school, and only 10% of kids make it. And
Mm.
so my wife and I said, well, this is a good experience because a lot of life is rejection and failure. And no matter what you are going into, you're going to be rejected hundreds of times.
Yeah.
So we're talking about resilience is some people don't like the definition of the speed in which you bounce back from rejection or failure. I've heard people say, I don't like the word bounce back. Okay. The manner, the way you deal with rejection and failure and how you frame that moving forward. As a, some people say, rejection is a redirection. Okay. And I like that one.
Yeah.
So however you say it, there's a big difference in my mind as an educator and as a parent of my daughter stayed up late at night. She handed in her form. You had to do a written form, and she also had to go. And it's quite nerve-wracking for a 9-year-old with no prep. You had to go and you had to create a project on the spot in front of a group of adults taking notes about you and watching every move. And that was going to be the judgment on whether or not she gets into this private school, this new school next year. So my wife and I had a talk, and we said, how, as teachers and parents, what are we going to say if she doesn't get in? Right? Like this could be a first significant rejection. So we talked about it and we said, you know what? We're going to let her feel the feeling of feeling rejected if she gets that. We're going to have a little bit of a conversation for a 9-year-old, not speaking to an adult. Keep it simple. But look, you have every right to feel a little sad. This happens, but we're not going to protect her from, first of all, not trying out just in case she doesn't get rejected, or protecting her too much after she falls. It's
Mm.
okay for kids to fall. That's hard for me because I am a bit overprotective as a parent, but it's okay for kids to fall, to get dumped in a relationship, but being there for them and ask them if they're okay, and and acknowledge their feelings. The worst thing you can do for a child, and I'm very adamant about this, is deny their right to feel the way they feel. You shouldn't feel that way. I've seen adults do this. I've seen adults do this to kids, and I've told parents, don't do that. You're going to scar them.
Yeah.
Allow kids to feel sad and say to them, it sounds like you're feeling frustrated. I am feeling frustrated. That's okay. It feels like I'm angry. It's okay to be angry. I know. That is acknowledging it. That's it. But before we were talking about bullying. No, a parent needs to protect their child from bullying. And that's when it's not being a helicopter parent. I think that's BS between you and I. When
Mm.
parents say, I was bullied. Oh, well, let me see how well adjusted you are. Let me see what kind of a parent you are. Let's look at your blind spots. As a coach, I could pick them up in about 5 minutes without even any data, just by their presence. So people who say I was bullied and they get a lot of likes on Instagram because they say, kids are, too soft today. I was bullied. I had an alcoholic father. Oh,
Mm.
please. You're probably a mess, and you've done damage to the people around you by again, the word is gaslighting. None of that matters. No, it matters. So why repeat what previous generations did to you? You can take the good of previous generations, which was, they had strength of spirit. They had excellent resilience through wars, world wars, and devastation and hunger and poverty. But you can also learn from those generations because a lot of men in particular, but women too, at least this is what I've seen, were horrible at expressing their feelings. They just they repressed their feelings. They didn't acknowledge their children's feelings, and their children, the adults today, suffer for it. So, bullying, I would suggest stepping in and do not let your kids get bullied. Be a proactive parent. Also teach your kids self-advocacy to stand up to bullies. You might have to punch a bully. I told my son does Taekwondo and he's almost at a black belt. When he was a little guy, he was mobbed by kids at school and he's got a hard kick. He kicked one kid and the kid fell over and hurt themselves. And he came home and he told me, and I said, good for you, because they all scattered. They all
Nice.
scattered. And he still brings it up. And I said, has anyone picked on you since? Nope. I wonder why. So that is advocacy. But if it's letting kids fall, Rejection is redirection, and allow them to find their own way as well.
No, it's beautifully said, because I think there's this sort of false placed aggression, right? Like, oh, um, go online and complain about everything. And, the same kid who got kicked, his mom probably be like, my kid got kicked, but no one wants to ask why did he get kicked? Because he bullied someone. And as a result, so as you said, it's these people you know, who are aggressors then play the victims. And that's the problem.
And that's part of narcissism.
Mm-hmm.
They they flip it. It's called blame shifting.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be careful about that, even if it's your kid.
Yeah.
Before the teacher's not always wrong, and other kids are not always wrong. That blame shifting is a manipulative tool of a bully. Well, they did something to me. Well, let's make sure they really did something and hear both sides.
That's tough as a teacher, right? Because it's
That
a
is.
balancing act. Yeah.
Yes.